This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I am your host, Mark. And today's guest makes me believe in inevitability. Mario Quintero is the singer and guitarist for the band Spotlights. He started the band with his now wife, Sarah. They met at the studio that Mario owned. But before all that, Mario was a kid from Colombia who grew up on his sister's albums and traditional Hispanic music like Mario Quintero Lara. He went to college for recording, but veered off into the jazz program playing guitar. After college, he opened a studio where he met Sarah, and that's where our coincidences began. It turns out that we all not only share a wedding anniversary, but we also ran into each other before. Mario during the last Failure tour, and Sarah at the last show I saw before the pandemic, Wovenhand Om. The pair connected and began playing together soon after. Mario talks about the band's name, working for some amazing other bands in many different capacities, and the difficulties in keeping a full-time job when you're touring with bands like the Melvins and Deftones. Spotlight's new album, Alchemy for the Dead, is awesome, and if you like heavy melodic music, you're going to love it. Pick it up wherever you get your music, follow them at Spotlights Music on Instagram, and if you get the chance, go see them live. You can help out the show by following us at Performance ANX on Twitter and Instagram. And you can support us through ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety with some coffee money, or by buying merch on performanceanx.threadless.com. And I hope you enjoy Mario Quintero from the Ultimate Husband and Wife Project, Spotlights, on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
I'll just try and wing it and see what happens. I'll make it like a radio. I'll try and pretend it's a radio one. Let's see. This is Mario Quintero from the band Spotlights. You're listening to Performance Anxiety Podcast. Our new album, Alchemy for the Dead, is out now. Go rock it. The easiest way is go to ipecac.com and go to the Spotlights link, and all our tour dates are there. You can buy all the records there. You can, we have our bio. All the information you need is there. And it's the shortest URL of all of them, just ipecac.com. We're on Spotlights Music on Instagram, and I think Spotlights Band on Facebook. I can't remember exactly, but, you can, Google will do the work for you. Just put Spotlights Band, and it'll find her. Mark.
Hey, Mario. How you doing?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good. How's it going?
Going good. Can you hear me all right and everything?
Oh, sounds great.
Awesome.
All right. Oh, I just keep knocking shit over here on my table. I'm trying to make one adjustment, and I can't seem to reach around without knocking over a pile of CDs or a bottle of booze.
Nice.
So, that's my podcasting space.
Sweet.
Music and alcohol. All right. So, thank you guys. Thank you for joining me. I've been looking forward to this one for a while.
Same, man.
Awesome.
So,
all right.
You're in Virginia?
Yeah. I'm in Winchester. So I'm it's like 75 miles due west of DC.
Oh, nice.
So
all right.
You guys are on the road, and I appreciate you doing this from the road.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally on the road, on the way to Tolono, Illinois.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, so you guys are touring with Bird Hands right now, right?
Yeah. We have a few more shows with them, and then we meet up with this band Ryle from Salt Lake City.
Oh, okay.
Who's an amazing band as well, yeah.
I love anything Alan Epley is involved in. I'm a big fan of.
Us too, man. He's awesome. He's our favorite person to tour with.
He's been on the podcast twice, and I love him to death. He's just a cool
nice.
dude, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's a sweetheart.
He's been very kind and gracious to the podcast when he's come on, and so you guys, I'm trying to think if I was listening to Third Gear Scratch or if he mentioned it I don't think he mentioned it when he was on, but I think it was afterwards. But he's mentioned the band Spotlights. And I think it was the single that you guys did together. And so that was the first time I heard of Spotlights. And I was like, okay.
Oh, really nice.
Yeah, I got to check these guys out. So there's always guilt by association. You guys got interest by association.
Well, I'll take that. That's awesome.
So, but before all of that happened, you had to get into music somehow, and that's kind of what I like to learn about, as to how you got to where you are now. And so, one thing I did discover in doing some research is that you are not to be confused with Mario Quintero Lara, who I discovered.
That guy steals all my thunder on the internet. I'll never get out from under his shadow, man.
Well, he's got one hell of a unibrow.
He seriously does, and talented dude, well deserved. So I'm just happy to share a name with him, I guess.
He's been doing it a long time, apparently.
He has, man. Yeah.
Jeez.
I'm Colombian. I grew up. Well, both my parents are Colombian. I actually lived in Colombia the first 8 years of my life, and
wow.
So I grew up. My dad was a huge Mexican music fan and Colombian music and all kinds of different Spanish music, but he knows, he's played Mario Quintero records over my lifetime. So
that is amazing.
Yeah, but hey, could be worse.
Hey, exactly. Apparently
he's not like a serial killer or something.
That's true. Yeah, you could be worse. You could be John Wayne Gacy or Albert Fish.
Right.
So, all right. So you mentioned growing up, was there a lot of music beyond Mario Quintero in the house?
Yeah, but mostly, either Colombian, Mexican, actual like Spanish music from Spain, like boleros and things like that.
It was very traditional.
Yeah, I was never too into it, because I was young and like, you don't really want to like what your parents like.
Exactly.
I appreciate it way more now. And some of the stuff, obviously it's nostalgic for me now, listening to stuff that my parents listened to when I was young, but some of it's incredible. And like just rhythmically, there has to be some of that had to have gotten in me somehow because I really appreciate a lot of the rhythms and stuff. And I think some of that stuff crosses over into what I like to do musically now. Maybe not like genre specific, but just rhythmically and harmonically and whatnot. So
you and I are pretty similar in age, so we kind of grew up in an insane era for music. And I had two older sisters too, so like as far as other stuff, that's really what I caught on to, is whatever my older sisters were listening to. Okay. Especially like early 80s, early mid 80s, stuff like that. That's when I really started kind of like poking around in their record collections and tape collections and stealing stuff from them. Yeah, because that was before CDs even. Yep. Oh man, so what got you interested in playing music in the first place? Was it an album or an artist, what was your first instrument?
Technically, the very first instrument I played was piano when I was like 4 years old. My parents had me in like piano lessons. But I didn't really get into it. I liked playing music, and I liked playing the piano, but I just wasn't into like, I just always hated school, and I always hated like taking classes. So it felt like school to me because it was all about sight reading and, so I never really followed through with that. But then when I was about 10, I think just from watching MTV a lot and like, that was like hair metal time. So a lot of like the Poison videos and Motley Crue videos and shit like that got me into just wanting to play guitar and wanting to do what those guys were doing.
Yeah, back when they played videos on MTV.
Yeah, I know, right? We were lucky to have that.
Yeah.
But I think that mixed with, again, like hearing records like Purple Rain and shit like that just started kind of sparking an interest in actually like what's going on, like what are these instruments that I'm hearing, and kind of started breaking that stuff up in my head.
Okay.
But when I was around 10, 11, something hit me, and I asked my mom if I could take a guitar lesson and see how it goes. And it just clicked right away. At first I actually played bass. So I went to the music store, rented a bass. I thought it was a guitar. I didn't know shit. I was just like, I think I want to play bass guitar. My friend was like, no, that guy's playing bass guitar. So I went to the store and was like, I want to play bass guitar. Came home with this giant, like, it was like one of those like steel headstocks, probably like a Travis B. It was probably some super sick bass that I, had my hands on. And played that for a couple nights. And I think I learned a U2 song on it.
Oh, wow.
But I was just like, it wasn't doing for me, like, it wasn't what I really wanted. So figured out what a guitar was, went back, took a lesson on guitar, and then it just clicked, and I don't think I ever looked back after that. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PerformanceANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD. So how soon after that were you playing with other people?
I think, it was a few years later. I sat in my bedroom and learned like every Cure song I possibly could.
Oh, yeah.
And I think when I was maybe 13 or 14, probably 13, I think I was in 8th grade, 9th. So yeah, like 13 or 14 in 9th grade, I joined this band I was a skateboarder, and some of my friends had a band called Basement. And I started playing with them, and that was my very first band experience. Yeah.
Oh, wow. You guys playing like parties and school functions and backyards and things like that? Or just in the basement?
It was mostly just like, well, I lived in Miami, so there are no basements, but we practiced in this little warehouse that one of the guys, the singer, Chris, his parents, they did like pottery, so we would just work in practice in their workshop. But yeah, I think we might have played like 2 parties tops, and that was it. And then after that, there was a couple other little like high school bands and whatnot.
Okay, I read that you started recording pretty early too. You had an interest in engineering and recording pretty early on.
Yeah, I kind of always liked it, even when I was just learning. Like when I was like just sitting in my bedroom trying to learn how to do stuff. I had a little Casio keyboard that had some drum sounds on there and keyboard sounds, and I just always wanted to hear. I always had the like urge to hear stuff back. Like I wanted to hear what I'm doing played back to me. So I would take my little boombox and then go get like my sister's boombox and record a guitar part onto one boombox, play it back while I was playing the Casio keyboard onto the other boombox, and start bouncing stuff,
Oh, wow.
So I always had like the instinct to want to do that stuff. But when I was probably like, I think I was 18 or 19 is when I finally got 4-track, and I actually started going to community college for recording.
Oh, cool.
To see, I don't know. I thought that was the way to go at that time. And then I took a semester of recording classes and ended up kind of veering into the jazz program there. And that's kind of how I got more into like studying guitar.
So at that point, were you thinking more along the lines of the production side of music instead of the performance side as a career?
Yeah, I think so. I had kind of like, the high school band stuff had ended, and I was just kind of being a dummy, smoking pot and driving around, and it felt like doing like recording might be more of like an actual viable career, which in the long run it's not, but
no.
It's basically the same as trying to be in a band. But so at that point I thought, I was kind of pushing more towards being an engineer. But again, as soon as I started going to community college and taking those classes, I just got sucked into the jazz program there and fell in love with playing in the big band, and just started it started taking off a little bit, and I was learning a ton, and I went from there to Berkeley in Boston and just studied jazz composition there and guitar.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's awesome. So the first thing that I see as a recorded credit is Sleep Lady. So was there something between Berkeley and Sleep Lady that band-wise, or were you focusing more on production?
No, I had a couple bands. I mean, I had a band in Boston with a friend of mine, and then when I moved to San Diego, my buddy Mike and I, we decided to just go for it and build a recording studio, like a full-on commercial recording studio.
Okay.
And we did, and we had a band together at the time called Hialeah that we played in for a few years while the studio was going on.
Okay.
And then that's how I met Sarah, actually, was recording her band at our studio in San Diego. It was called Black Box, the studio, not her band. But,
right.
So yeah, that's where I met Sarah, and then her and our friend Mike Hayden and his wife Christy. Mike was really like the main guy for Sleep Lady. He had a record all set up already, and Sarah joined the band and told me that I should join the band, and I agreed, and we that's how Sleep Lady started. And
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had recorded a ton of other bands, but that might be the first thing that you can like find on the internet.
Right. So, all right, were you writing your own music at this point? I mean, you said you were in another band, and did any of that translate into Sleep Lady, or was that pretty much all the other?
Not really. I think by the time Sleep Lady started, I had almost kind of the band Hialeah had broken up.
Okay.
And that stuff was way more fast paced, like kind of just trying to shove as many parts into songs as you could, trying to a little more flashy and trying to be cool. And I had kind of, after that band broke up, I'd kind of given up a little bit, not on music, but just I didn't really feel like being in a band at that point and dealing with just egos and, the whole band thing. But as soon as I jammed, we played with Sleep Lady. I mean, the first practice we had, it just clicked, and it was an instrumental band for the most part. So I was only playing guitar, and I didn't have to really do any of the writing. Like Mike had most of the stuff laid out already. So I was basically just playing parts and adding whatever I wanted to. I could, it felt way more creative on a different level than just sitting in a room with dudes jamming and fighting and writing songs that weren't going to go anywhere half the time. So yeah, Sleep Lady was awesome. So
you knew what he wanted you to do, but he gave you some freedom to make it your own.
Yeah, but it took the pressure off of like, there was none of us in the band really had any aspirations other than like, this is awesome, we should play shows.
Okay.
Where every other band I had, it was kind of like, this is me. It just, there was more of like a self pressure to like try and do something with it and try and like get people to like us and try and get on a label and try and do stuff. And I think we were trying so hard that we were just shooting ourselves in the foot in the long run. But where with Sleep Lady, we just played and we just wanted the band to sound as good as it could sound. We were only really worried about the music, and we're playing 12-minute long songs. So obviously we weren't trying to like get on the radio.
Right.
And then, it just started clicking. Like, that's when I realized, I'm like, oh, okay. So you just have to sound good and love what you do, and people will connect with it on a different level than when you're just kind of trying to go for something.
Yeah.
Instead, just worry about the art first.
I was listening to it, and I think it sounds awesome. I know There Are No Happy Accidents is just such an amazing song. I love this.
That was fun,
such a cool album. And so was this, you mentioned, Sarah encouraging you to join. Was this the first project that you two worked on together as bandmates, I guess? Yeah.
That was the first time we were bandmates. I think, yeah, probably, right? Sorry, Sarah's right here in the back there. Yeah, that was the first time we played together. And then shortly after that, we were friends already at that point. And during Sleep Lady, we were always talking about like doing a record together, just the two of us. And eventually we finally got into the studio and recorded what ended up being the very first Spotlight song. We didn't have a name or anything for it at that point or anything, but just we went into the studio and 4 hours wrote and recorded a song, and it just clicked. And
I've definitely got some questions about that. So
yeah.
Before we get into that, I wanted to ask you how we ended up playing drums on Machines Learning.
I always kind of loved drums when I was younger, like playing with my friends in bands and stuff. I would always get behind the kit and mess around. And
okay.
When I owned the studio, I had a lot of time to actually like play drums, and a lot of bands would come in, and it's hard to find a good drummer, so they wouldn't, or they were, I had friends that were writing songs but needed drums played on it, so I started kind of playing for people. And the Machines Learning thing came because Paul, the main songwriter in that band, his drummer quit, and he had all these songs that he wanted to record. So he came in and was like, well, you just asked me if I would play on it. And it was awesome. I loved the song. So I was like, hell yeah, I'll do that.
That's another cool album.
Yeah, I forget about that one, man. It was such a good, Paul was really talented. But yeah, so we did that record, and then we ended up playing a couple shows with that band too.
Oh, cool.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So you mentioned the first Spotlights recording. That's 050809.
Yeah.
All right. So what does that mean? What is that?
So it's the date that Sarah and I finally decided to be together.
Oh,
basically.
that is awesome.
It's the first night we made out. I'll put it out there.
Oh man. So now that means so much more to me.
Yeah.
You guys didn't have a name for the band at that point, if I'm...
No, yeah. So we picked the name because I was putting out a compilation for the studio of just local bands that had recorded there. And we wanted to put that song on it. And so that's when we kind of just came up with the name and threw it on that compilation.
Is there anything behind the name? Or was it just because it was supposed to try to spotlight the studio?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, I don't know. Well, we had a couple different options, and there was a point in time when Sarah and I first started dating where there was a little bit of drama going on, and we felt like we were in the spotlight for lack of a better word. And we came up with it, and it seemed like a good name, and it stuck.
The sound of the band is insane.
Thank you.
To me, it's like the soundtrack to an avalanche. It's just
that's awesome.
It's just so heavy. It's hard to believe this. It's sometimes when you're recording just a duo or a 3-piece,
Yeah.
It's unbelievable the sound that you guys get.
Thanks.
Was that the first things you were recording? Were you trying to just get as heavy as possible, or was it just? I mean, was there a reason that it got so heavy, and you guys didn't do something a little bit more like the lighter stuff on Sleep Lady?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, actually, Sleep Lady, to me, if you listen to some of the other stuff, is really fucking heavy. And live, we were super heavy.
Okay.
And I think some of that translated into Spotlights too. But with Spotlights, we didn't really go for anything. I mean, even especially for that first song, we went in the studio. I told Sarah, I was like, just play something. And she came up with this little line, then came up with another like heavier bass part. And it's just what came out. From there, it just kind of developed, and we love heavy music and we love beautiful music, and it's just the things that we like that kind of just come out of us, I guess.
Well, it combines both of those elements, so it's amazing. Like seismic. It's an insane. That's when it's like the soundtrack to an avalanche. That's kind of the song that comes to mind, and it's just unbelievable. But
thanks, man.
It sounds to me like you guys had a pretty good idea of what you wanted to sound like from the very beginning. It wasn't the Demonstration EP, and I'm assuming because it's called Demonstration, it was demos.
Yeah, you're the first person to actually get that, I think.
so even that early on, the sound is pretty well formed, and it's insanely intense. And I was just kind of blown away by the clearness of your guys' sight at that early point.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's weird because, like I said, honestly, we didn't have any sort of idea of like where we were headed or what it was going to be. This was literally like, because that was actually the goal of the band. It was like, let's just, again, we want to do what we want to do, and that's it. And there was no like, oh, well, we should sound like this, or I would love to make it more like whatever genre or whatever. There was just no like intent behind it in that sense. The real intent was just to make something that we loved. And so, like, especially with Demonstration, most of that stuff I came up with just on a laptop. Like, it all mostly stemmed from like the electronic side of stuff. So, I would come up with a little synth part and show it to Sarah, and we would get into the practice room and like just kind of like just try stuff. There was no, and then it kind of shifted around to more like guitar. I just started hearing more guitar stuff in the songs, and that's kind of where, because I initially played drums in Spotlights. It was just me and Sarah. I was on drums, and she was playing bass, and we were both doing vocals, and there was just a lot of electronic elements.
Okay. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
But I eventually just wanted to play guitar, really. So we started looking for drummers.
Oh,
it became a 3-piece.
Is that when you found Chris, or was he a later addition?
He was a little bit later. Yeah, we went through a couple, but Chris came along when we finally. I mean, we didn't really do too much before we found Chris. We had played a couple local shows. We played a party. That was our very first show. And then I think we played one show like at St. Vitus, with opening for Shiner, actually, which was like our first real show. And then shortly thereafter was when Titles came out, and we got offered the Deftones tour, and when we actually ended up getting Chris to play.
Okay. And so that was after you guys signed to Ipecac.
No, this was before Ipecac. So,
okay, before Ipecac.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right. So I want to get into that, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you were doing in the meantime, because I did hear that you had a tour and done sound for bands like Hum, Quicksand, Failure. Was that in the early era of Spotlights, or is that spread throughout the whole?
As far as me working for bands, you mean?
Yeah.
No, that was relatively recent. That Failure tour was last summer, and then Spotlights as a band we played with Hum, but I never worked for Hum.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I probably saw you at the Failure show in Maryland then.
Yeah, I was there.
Okay. so was I, bumping into Priscilla.
I was on the stage off to the side, tuning guitars.
Oh, awesome. That's okay. So that brings me to something else that I had heard, and I want to double check. We are all atomic, and I'll go back to everything else, but because we're kind of on this topic, I wanted to ask. That was a lot of you doing the music on that, right? Because I believe I heard that Sarah was on tour with Om at that point. doing merch and stuff?
She was, yeah. I mean, she did play on the record. I played drums on that one as well, but that one and a lot of that stuff was kind of older ideas that ended up coming together for that EP. Because again, that EP was meant to be kind of like we wanted to do something different for Blues Funeral. It was like for the post wax release that they did. But no, yeah, Sarah was on tour with Om at the time when I was kind of like starting to record everything. And when she got back, we had a deadline of like 2 weeks, basically. The record had to be done. So as soon as she got back, we just finished everything and then I mixed it and sent it off.
Oh, man. Was that the tour where Wovenhand opened up for Om?
Yep. That was.
Then I probably.
So I guess, she must have been on tour with High on Fire at that point because the Om tour got canceled because of COVID.
Okay, because I saw Om with Wovenhand opening up, and that was the last show I saw before everything got locked down for COVID.
Yeah, she was there. She was working that tour doing merch.
So I probably ran into you at Maryland, and then your wife in DC on two completely separate occasions, two totally different
probably.
shows. That's pretty crazy. All right, so back to where we actually were. How did you end up getting on the tour with was it the Deftones and Melvins, or was it two different?
Those were two separate tours. Okay. Yeah. So that was the Deftones tour was our very first tour as Spotlights, which was crazy.
How did you get such a high profile opening?
Yeah, I mean, we were absolutely nobody at the time, less than we are. We had just put out our very first single, which was the song "Walls" off of Titles. That day, it seemed to be doing well. We were getting a lot of messages from friends, and our friend Aaron Harris, who we had worked with Sleep Lady as well. He mixed one of our records for Sleep Lady. He was drum teching for Abe Cunningham at the time, and they were on tour. So he was out with Deftones and hanging out with Chino and whatnot. Oh. And I guess he passed the song along to him. And the next day or the day after, we received an email from their booking agent and offering us a tour that we thought was like a scam. It didn't really like register that could be something real. Oh, and it was kind of vague too, asking like, hey, we'd like to know if you're available to tour with a large rock band. Let me know. And that was it. So I was like, what? Oh my gosh. So we looked it all up and looked up their booking agent, and he booked all these great bands. And so we wrote him back, and we were like, of course, yeah. We were available, and we were into it. And he writes us back saying, okay, it's opening for Deftones and Refused. Here are the dates.
Wow.
Let me know. And that was it.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty crazy.
But that's just a testament to how good the music is, but also the fact that you guys knew the sound. You had that clearness of vision from the beginning.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I still have no idea. I don't know. It's just crazy still.
All right, so how did the relationship with Ipecac get started?
So again, with Aaron Harris, we had decided that we were going to work with him to record our next record, which ended up being Seismic. We already had all the demos basically done for the album, and just regardless of whether we got on a label or not, we were going to work with him anyway. And so us and him started kind of putting a plan together to send out to a few labels just to see if somebody would pick it up before we actually recorded, just so maybe we could either get a little bit of money to help with the recording, because we were going to fly out to LA to work with him. So for us, it was a huge expense. And his band ISIS had been on Ipecac already, and Palms as well. And so he just reached out to Greg, sent him the demos. Greg is the owner of Ipecac. And yeah, Greg was into it. But again, him and Mike Patton, they're both like the owners of the label, and their deal is they both have to love the band, any band that they're going to sign. Right. Otherwise they don't sign them. So like if one guy loves the band and the other guy's not into it, they don't do it.
Oh, okay.
So Greg got back to us and was like, I love this, but I just don't think Mike's going to go for it. We'll see. He's like, we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
And the next day we got an email from him saying, Mike loves it, let's do it. So that was it. And ever since then we've been there with them.
Oh man, it sounds,
they're amazing.
I was going to ask, it sounds like it's just a perfect match for you guys.
Yeah, we couldn't be happier. Like we couldn't have imagined a better label to be on. But we were already big fans of the label and all the music that they put out, and just like their philosophy.
Yeah.
So
they have such a wide variety of artists on there. So many different types of music, some styles.
Yeah, everything.
It's really impressive. So, and you guys, I love the atmosphere in the music. Every song has something like, take for example, Should Time Stand Still? It's a static in it. There's acoustic guitar. There's an organ. I mean, It's just, there's so much going on. It's just, there's such a mood with that song. When you guys are playing stuff like that live, are you concerned at all about recreating any of that, or do you rework it so you play it a little bit differently live?
I mean, it depends on the song. So something like that song in particular, I don't even know if we would play that live. Maybe at some point, some of those more like acoustic and just like semi-ambient pieces, I think of as more just recording pieces,
Okay.
But with all the songs, with all our records really, we've never played those songs until we record them. We've never played them together until we record them. So That moment in time, we're capturing like what they are at that moment. And then we figure out like, okay, how are we going to do this live? So sometimes it's easy to just kind of play what's on the record. Sometimes we have to adjust drum parts or guitar part. We have to play the guitar part instead of doing something with the keyboard that's on the recording. I'll do it on guitar. But we also, we put a lot of the electronic stuff live through the PA just because I feel like that's a big part of the sound as well. So instead of adding an extra person just to play a little keyboard line, I trigger it all from my pedal board and
that's great.
And put it out into the PA.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier for you guys.
Yeah.
And it keeps that atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like off the new album, Beyond the Broken Sky, to me it's something similar in that, and it's just got this atmosphere to it, this heaviness to it without, at least to start without all the crushing guitars. There's just, you guys have kind of mastered that, in my opinion. And
thanks, man.
you guys write together a lot, or is there one main songwriter, or is it a lot of collaborative work?
On this record, there was a little bit. Mostly, I've been the main, songwriter. I usually I'll write the songs, demo stuff out, and then show these guys the parts that I have. And I try and kind of have everything basically like fleshed out and structured so that we can all like make a decision on it in a more like, in a more real way. So we're not just hearing like a guitar part that we have to like imagine what it would sound like. I want them to hear kind of what the vision is first, and then we kind of go from there,
Okay.
And usually it works out for the most part. But on this album, we did collaborate quite a bit. So like Chris and I, especially, were sending back and forth a lot of drum beats, just because our focus on this record was to kind of just change things up a little bit, and so not do the same thing that we've already done a few times. And I think that was a big part of it. Is I would ask Chris to just sit in his practice room and just come up with ideas, and so he would send me videos of him playing different beats. And even if that particular beat didn't make it onto the song, it would trigger an idea for me to come up with something, with a new riff or like an idea for a bass line, or an idea
cool.
whatever it would, or a song would come out of it, So it's a cool way to kind of spark inspiration versus just me sitting in a room trying to come up with stuff on guitar or whatever.
That makes sense. You've done some awesome covers as well.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Like the Mew cover you did. Oh, holy crap. That is
nice.
Awesome. And during the whole pandemic, you guys would release a series of covers. Do you approach covers in a similar way, where you've got the idea and then you're telling Sarah and Chris, or is it more collaborative in that aspect?
It's about the same for the most part. Even more so, I think, especially for those in particular, just because those were all done during COVID, so I was just kind of at home with nothing else to do, so started coming up with ways to stay creative.
Right.
And unfortunately, like on most of those, Chris didn't get to play. He did play on the Shudder to Think cover. It was more just to like keep putting stuff out and stay creative. But for the most part, it was just sitting at home coming up with the ideas.
Well, I like the covers, and you mentioned the Shudder to Think. One of the things that was really cool to me is that some of the covers that you're doing aren't obvious influences in the music, like Red House, Shudder to Think. That's when I hear Spotlights, Shudder to Think does not immediately pop into my head.
For all of us, I think they're one of our favorite bands. I love that band. And I would say they're probably a bigger influence on me than a lot of things people would imagine are.
Oh, really?
But I think influence should be like that and is more like that. Like, influence isn't really something that like you're copying necessarily. It's something that informs what comes out of you, I think, more,
Oh, yeah.
So, bands like that, bands like even like Jawbox too, a lot of those bands are huge influences on me and us, I think.
Well, and I think part of that goes back to like we were talking about in the very beginning, the time where we grew up listening to music. It was, you had all these awesome bands like Jawbox and Shudder to Think and Failure and all, and it was just a huge amount of awesome music to take in and be influential in the music that you create.
Yeah, definitely.
So the band has been very consistent releasing things, and whether it's an album or an EP, which I love that you guys release EPs. I've had a bunch of bands on here who say, I don't like releasing EPs because people don't buy them. They don't know what to do with them because it's not a full length album.
Yeah.
I love EPs because for some reason, to me, bands seem to be a little more willing to experiment on EPs. Like it's the weird stuff that comes out on EPs, and I love that.
That's why we like them, I think, because it gives you a chance to just do whatever. Atomic EP was a really good chance to just kind of, and then we have like the Hanging by Faith EP, which is like a bunch of remixes of songs and a cover that we have that Cure cover on there. So yeah, I mean, I know, it's not going to be the same amount of press and all that stuff behind it, but it gives us something to do and it keeps us going. And especially, you know, we really focus on touring and we love touring. I think it's probably the thing we like to do the most. So it gives us a little something just to kind of keep the momentum going during the tour cycle, during the album cycle, you know.
Yes. Yeah, so are you guys out on the road touring a lot?
Yeah, I mean, ever since 2016, we've been touring a few, 3 to 5 months out of the year. And
wow.
Obviously the last few years were an exception, but now we're back out and like we're doing 2 months in the US right now. We get back and we have some other stuff that isn't announced yet that we're going to do. And then hopefully make it to Europe at the end of the year as well. Nice. Did I lose you there?
Nope. There we go. We're back. We had some buffering there for a second, but I think we're back.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. We're like in the middle of nowhere in Illinois right now. So it might get a little spotty.
So you guys ended up moving to Pittsburgh right during the whole lockdown COVID era. What spurred the move from, were you in New York or San Diego at that point?
We were in New York.
In New York. Okay.
Yeah.
So what spurred the move to Pittsburgh and why Pittsburgh? All right. Are you back?
I got a couple baseball bars here now.
Okay.
So, yeah. The band started in New York, and then, we were there for, I think, a little over 5 years. First 3 years were awesome. I had kind of like I scored a job doing some audiovisual work at Barnard College, which is like the Women's College of Colombia.
Right. Okay.
So, it was full salary, decent money, good benefits, all that, which I'd never really had. So kind of did that for a while until the band started doing more stuff. And then once we started touring, it was tough to hold that down. I was lucky enough where I could work it was a managerial position, so I could work from the road a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I mean, a lot of it. I did most of that. I did a few tours. And then when we got the Melvins tour in 2017, that was a 3-month tour. It was we did a bunch of one-offs. With everything, it was like 81 shows.
Oh, wow.
And so that didn't really work out. After a month and a half in, they were getting fed up. I was getting fed up. So I ended up quitting.
Yeah.
So, after that tour, I came home and Sarah she had a job working, we were doing basically just a bunch of part-time work. She worked at venues doing merch, worked at a pet store. I was working at St. Vitus doing sound, but it just wasn't enough to keep it going, And even when I had the job at Barnard, it still wasn't enough to manage being a band in New York. And we'd be coming home from these tours with very little to no money, and come home to a 4-floor walk up that just cost too much to afford, and it was crowded and hectic, and it just started kind of getting to Sarah and I. So we decided to make the move, and we looked around. We always liked Pittsburgh when we would play there, just how it looks and how the people are, and it just seemed like a fun town. So we checked around like New York, like upstate New York, New Jersey, because we wanted to stay relatively close, but everything was already too blown out, So like it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, anywhere in New Jersey is almost as bad as New York.
It might as well be the same now.
I know. I lived there for years, and it's just back when I lived there, it was ridiculous.
Yeah. So we ended up looking up Pittsburgh because we remembered it was a cool town and it looked cool, and it was just like compared to New York, just dirt cheap.
Oh yeah.
Rents were half, if not more, and so we just took a weekend, went and checked it out, and looked at a bunch of places and rented a place, got out of our lease in New York, and just took off.
Oh, that is awesome. I've been to Pittsburgh a grand total of once.
Nice.
And I thought it was last summer, and I thought it was awesome.
It's a really cool town, man. Yeah, it's scenic, there's tons to do, and like, we're not at this point, at this age, I'm not like, the nightlife part of our lives isn't huge anyway. So like we wanted more space, and like now we have a yard. We were able to buy a house eventually a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
Which is something I would have never happened anywhere else I lived.
True. Yeah. Yeah. San Diego or New York. That's just been insane.
That's crazy.
But I hate every Pittsburgh sports team, but I like the city. I can't go with any Pittsburgh teams, but the city itself is good.
I'm not a big sports fan, which is weird for living in Pittsburgh. You have to kind of be a sports fan, I guess.
Yeah, you might become one at some point but not by choice either.
Right.
So, all right. So you moved into the house, and did that have an effect on the new album? Because the new album, I mean, it sounds like Spotlights for sure, but it sounds a little bit, I don't know, tighter, or it sounds like a progression for sure. Did that move affect the writing and the recording?
I think inevitably any kind of move like that does, like I think our move to New York was definitely a catalyst for just what ended up being Spotlights. Right. And now the move here, and like you said, the new space, especially, I built a studio in the basement of the house that we bought.
Oh, nice.
And so, it's small. It's a little basement studio still, but that's where I do most of my mix work and everything. And I'm able to record there too, but it's really small, and it's a basement. So it's literally like 7-foot ceilings,
Yeah.
It's super tight, and kind of like when you're recording a full band, it's pretty claustrophobic.
Oh, wow.
So I think that kind of like played into the actual sound. And before we even made the record, that's really one of the main things we were thinking about, was the production of it, and the sound of it is what I really wanted to like focus on. And having that small space, it kind of gave me the thought of like making things a little more confined and like claustrophobic sounding, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
But almost like I wanted it to sound like the sound was like trying to break out of a room.
Oh, hey, well, mission accomplished for sure.
Thanks, man. And that really sparked the initial idea of like the push to like do things differently, so like sonically, almost before we really started writing or getting like the actual songs together, I had more of like a production idea in my head of what the album should sound like.
Oh, cool.
Which dictated a little bit of the writing as well, I think, in the long run.
Interesting. Oh, now, are they all new songs, or are some of them older that you brought back?
It's a mix, yeah. 2 of them are actually really old, like before titles, like 2014 when we started first writing music. But they were just ideas that I kind of had on the back burner. I tend to keep most of the stuff that I write just, in hard drives. And whenever a new album comes up, I'll just sift through stuff just to kind of spark new ideas or see if there's anything usable.
That's awesome.
These 2 in particular, it's the first song, Beyond the Broken Sky and Crawling Toward the Light. Those were, like 2014. But, the structures were a little different or whatever. And then I was going through old stuff when we started putting songs together for this album last year. and it just seemed like it was a perfect time to finish those, you know.
Those are two awesome songs. So Beyond the Broken Sky definitely sets the mood for the album. It's an awesome opener.
Yeah.
And I've been listening to this for a while now, and it's just killer. I was Crawling Towards the Light. What really hit me about that is, to me, it kind of sounds like if Failure wrote a song with Gary Newman.
That's awesome.
It's just got this.
I love it.
I mean, you were mentioning early on your love of the 80s music from your sister and all, and it kind of sounds like the heaviness of like a heavy Failure song meets, because there's a little bit of like I don't know, maybe synth sound, like maybe a Gary Newman kind of a sound to it, and that's just how it struck me. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff was a huge influence on me, like early New Order stuff, even like gothier stuff like Depeche Mode. The Cure for me is probably my biggest influence growing up. So all those synth sounds and stuff and little hooks, especially The Cure. I mean, a lot of those bands use those little synth hooks to kind of develop parts. So like knowing that, if you really listen to Spotlights, you hear that throughout the whole catalog, I think. Oh,
for sure. And that's one of the cool things I like about it is the songs will be very heavy and dark. And then there's some little bright pop in there that I'm not expecting. It's just like, oh, what was that? It keeps it from sounding like other heavy bands, which I love.
Right.
So
thanks, man. I appreciate that. The
first single was The Alchemist, right? Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
No, first single was Algorithmic.
Oh, Algorithmic. Okay. So, that's the one that it's so heavy, but it's got these beautiful harmonies in it. I love those. I love it. Sunset Burial. Oh my gosh. That's if listeners, if they like Deftones, Failure, that's right up their alley. That's such a great track. I think two of my favorites, though, I love False Gods. To me, that sounds kind of like if Swans did a Pink Floyd cover.
Nice. I love that comparison.
It's got that crushing, brutal riff, but then it sounds like a slide coming through it, almost like David Gilmour soloing over a Swan song. It's amazing.
Thanks.
And then I think my favorite track on the album is Repeat the Silence.
Oh, nice.
It sounds like an early Failure song. But where that killer bass line is just free to go and just keep going and repeating. Yeah. And I love that. And that's one of the things that I love about the band is your songwriting is so patient. It's you guys let the song develop and let it grow. It's not like, we've got to start singing here within the first 15 seconds. We've got to hit the chorus at this point. There's songs where a couple of minutes go by before there's any vocals. And
totally.
I absolutely love that. It's maybe unconventional, but I kind of like that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, that's I think back to like the influence thing. I think The Cure for me is a band that really taught me that, just because, especially if you listen to like not so much the singles that they put out or like the more poppy stuff that they have, but like later tracks on like Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, or even some of the Disintegration stuff, it really waits like 2 or 3 minutes before any vocals come in. And for the most part, it's just one riff and one beat, and it just keeps developing, and then little bits of synth come in or a guitar line, and every little piece that comes in is a hook that keeps you interested so you don't get bored.
Exactly. And that influence is definitely shining through in Spotlights.
Thanks, man.
Is there a theme that runs through this album, a conscious theme? Because it seems to me, it sounds like there's a lot of dealing with death in this album.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, a theme is exactly right. Like, it's not necessarily a concept album or anything like that, but the overarching theme is about, different aspects of death, from just plain old, like, how humans deal with it and how some people are afraid of it. Some people are not afraid of it. It deals with anything from like murder to suicide to just the philosophical aspect of death itself, to like how different cultures will even like, zombify their dead and things like that.
Yeah.
And also like the more like occult side of things, where seances and trying to talk to spirits and things like that, like how it's an interesting subject to me. I think just there's so many different aspects of it. Meanwhile, it's the only thing that we all have in common.
True. Very true. That's true. And that darkness that is shown, it comes through in the artwork too. So
yeah.
Are you guys doing your own artwork? Are you guys having people do that as well?
We always put together on our own artwork. We've had a couple of photographers that we've used in the past, but for the most part, we just take things that we like, and then I'll usually put it together somehow and make something out of it. We did have, for We're All Atomic, they had an artist that was doing the whole post-wax thing. So that one, which is awesome. I love that artwork.
It is. And that is definitely one that's a little different from the other artwork.
You can tell it stands out differently for sure.
Yeah. But I've gotten so into your band. It is just...
Oh man, thank you so much.
It fits right in there. It's kind of... I love the bands that and I don't want to say you sound like these guys, but
sure.
I don't even know how to put it. Because I hate saying you sound like these guys, because Spotlight sounds like Spotlights.
I mean, the way I look at that sometimes is we can't help but like compare or relate something to something else. If you like something, it's usually because it kind of is familiar to you in some other way.
Right.
So I don't mind, people compare sometimes to bands that make no sense to me, but if it makes them come to us, and they can relate to it on whatever level makes sense to them, then that's awesome. That's in a
podcast. I have to kind of give a frame of reference, I guess, for people. I'm going to put clips of songs in here, but but Spotlight to me kind of fills that gap right between like Failure and Pelican.
Nice.
Which I love, because I love the heaviness of Pelican.
Are awesome.
And I love the music of Failure, but I also love their vocals. And to me, you fit like right in there in that Greg Edwards type of vocals.
Oh man, I mean that's a huge compliment. I love Greg Edwards.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's amazing. He's in fact the only member of Failure I haven't had on the podcast yet.
Oh really?
I'm working on that though.
It's awesome.
So, all right, I do have a couple more questions, and I know you've got to get ready for the gig.
Sure.
But I did hear a really interesting story about you going on tour with Shiner and having to fill in last minute as a guitarist.
Yeah.
That's got to be daunting. How the heck because it was kind of a last minute thing, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
How did that happen? And how did you prep for something like that in a short period of time?
It's just, working under pressure. You gotta do what you gotta do. Al from Shiner called me this was maybe 5 days before we were about to leave for the tour. Spotlights was playing with them on that tour. And, he sounded bummed out, and he's like, man, I don't know what to do. Like, Josh just got called in. He's going to have to go to work. He can't get out of this thing that he's got to do, because he works for King Leon. He's a guitar tech. And, it's a big deal. It's his livelihood. He can't just be like taking off for a few days of tour. So,
right. Yeah.
Al was like, would you be able to do it? Would you be into it even? And I was like, hell yeah, I would love to play with you guys. Let's just see what happens, And so luckily I had a couple days before Chris was getting to our house to rehearse for a couple days for spotlights, because we, since we don't live in the same city, that's pretty much how we do it. Chris will just fly out a couple days before tour and we'll just practice and go.
Okay.
So I really only had like 3 days of just being at home. I lucked out. I didn't have any more work to do mix wise or anything. So I took those 3 days and just, I knew a lot of the songs already in my brain, but their guitar parts, they don't, it almost sounds like one guitar player usually when they're playing. It's this intertwined kind of angular mix of parts. So breaking them apart was really the hardest part. The playing, there's, some parts are a little challenging, but for the most part, the actual physical playing isn't too tough. It's all about figuring out who was playing who, getting it to kind of getting the Josh vibe down. Yeah. And then more than anything, figuring out the pedals, like translating what he does to my setup.
Oh, wow.
So it would sound good enough to be played with Shiner.
Yeah. Cause you got to get the sound right. Otherwise it's not going to, even if you're playing the right thing, it's not going to sound right. Yeah.
Cause he's such a maniac when it comes to soundscapes and pedals and whatnot. So like, that was probably the biggest challenge, but also kind of the funnest part, of the whole thing was figuring all that out. And Josh helped me out he helped me out a lot by, he made videos of himself playing, especially some of the new songs, playing stuff. And it worked out perfect because he's left-handed. I'm right-handed. So it was like a mirror image.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
I didn't have to figure much out. If I had a question, I would pull up the video and just see like, where's he playing that? Okay, there it is. And,
that's awesome.
So that helped a lot,
And, we mentioned a little earlier that you had done sound for, like Failure and Quicksand. Does that help you at all when you're out on the road with spotlights? I mean, is that a help to work with bands that are very particular about their sound?
Yeah, I mean, I think all that helps. Working with people that are, I think everybody we've toured with has taught us a shitload in all different ways. Like, even from Deftones, especially, I always give a lot of credit to the Melvins teaching us a lot, especially about how to tour and how to be a sustainable band. They're like, to us, they have the ultimate career as a band, mainly because of their longevity and their consistency with their fans. They tour incessantly and always just, nobody gets bored of it. They can always fill the rooms. They can always do the thing. And it's because they've built up, first of all, they trim all the fat. There's no bullshit external costs that don't need to be there. If like so many bands just waste money on extra production stuff that it's not really going to do anything for them and the show.
Okay. Interesting.
Melvins could tour in a bus, but they still tour in a van.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That right there saves you $1,500 a day.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Probably, if not more, when you put in gas in the driver. So
yeah, that's true. I didn't. That's the things a lot of people don't think about. Like, especially if you're not in the industry, you don't necessarily think about that stuff.
Exactly. Making that kind of money, that makes them sustainable. Therefore, they can keep making music and they can keep touring at that level without crashing. Where a lot of bands end up miserable because it's just too hard. And then on the technical side, like touring with Failure was a huge learning experience. Ken is an incredible engineer and I've respected his work forever. I didn't really know Failure as a band too much until relatively recently, like the last 10, 11 years is when I really found out about Failure.
Since the Reformation.
So like, I mean, I knew they were a band. I just never really had gotten into them. But Sarah actually was a fan since she was younger. So she kind of turned me on to them more.
Oh, awesome.
And, getting to kind of know them at an older age, I think was interesting because I love their music definitely, but their approach to like the technical aspect of things and how they approach just being such a precise and good sounding band is awesome. And I think it's inspiring. So like being on that tour and it was fun just working with Ken on that because we were setting up a ton of technological shit for like his pedal board and setting up a playback system for them and all this stuff. So I learned stuff that I was already doing with spotlights that they weren't doing. So we kind of like fed off each other a lot. And it was,
cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great experience, but I learned a ton for sure.
That is awesome. Well, I've loved the album. It's one that's going to be, it's in my car right now. It's on constant rotation.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's one of the best things I've heard all year. So
thank you, man.
And I know you've got a gig you've got to get to. So I want to thank you for spending so much time, taking the time while you're on the road to do this podcast, man. That is awesome.
No worries, man. I appreciate it.